Free Friday webinars. I'm Shelly Sanchez Terrell, and every week we are here thanks to American TESOL, and it is free. You can come. We have over 200 recorded live webinars, over 200 slides and PDFs you can download, and we also have the ESL Tech course. It is for technology certification. For American TESOL members, you can get in for free, and for the rest of you, you can get a certificate of attendance for attending the always free webinars to everyone. um, this week, we're going to talk about audio projects, and next week, we're going to follow up with video projects. So they kind of go hand in hand sometimes. So it's actually quite good to see both webinars so that way you can get an idea of how you can do both. Because usually when you have a video project, you often will find that you will need to edit audio as well. So sometimes teachers decide to have projects where they will have both, where what they do is they have a video, and then they have another group of students do the audio, or they may put students in groups. You could put them in groups of 3 or 4, perhaps, or even in pairs where they create a script together. And then one of them takes the task of editing the audio, and both of them could be in the audio as well. So if you have a group of 3 or 4, then these are some different types of ways that you can do these projects. And we'll talk a little bit more about it in a bit. But right now, I really like this quote by Harry Von Zell, and he talks about how personal the medium is. And so when you do a technology project, I think the focus isn't always so much on the technology, but a lot of the focus is on what it does, what the project does. And because the students in the end, they are impacted by how they impact others. And that's one of the great things about audio projects, that if you work with young learners, if you work with adults, if you work with teens, you can get them really interested in recording their voices, and you can protect their voices as well. But it's one of the projects that's good to start, because it's a nice way to protect the identity of your students, and you can allow your students to you can tell the parents that it's their voice, but you can always alter their voice. And so it's a great way to start a tech project and have parent approval. Definitely, before you do any of the projects, and we've talked about it before, have an acceptable use policy or responsible use policy, and there are bookmarks for that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video, so that way this could run more smoothly. But you will see you will definitely see my here we go, my face there. And Naomi says it gives students an opportunity to have a creative voice, but an opportunity to take the lead, to design and produce a live show to share with the world. Absolutely. And students are really impacted by the response they get. So there are different types. These are only a few of the ideas. So before we even start the project, decide what kind you want. You could do announcements, you could do podcasts, you could do radio dramas, you could do debates, a radio show, or it's an ongoing. So there's a few differences when it's interesting because there was an article that was shared today by TeacherCast, or a few days ago, that talks about the difference between a radio show and a podcast. And these days, that line is getting very blurred. They're very. What happens is, sometimes, what has an RSS feed, which technically means it's a podcast, is considered a radio show as well. So it used to be that if you had a little And if you don't know what an RSS feed, it's an orange kind of triangle that has lines, and um, it means that you can subscribe. So, and the benefit for that is there's many different places like iTunes where you could get that for free. So that's wonderful. And what it means is every time your class does a does a podcast, or now a radio show, that they'll be able to share with the family quite easily, either through iTunes or through podcasting network. And we're going to look at those later. But these are just a few ideas. You could have it to where it's a one-time thing. So it could be a one-time project, or it could be an ongoing project. For our language learners, it's a really quick, easy way to get them to speak English quite regularly. So if you can do an ongoing, even the shortest shows, 5 minutes, tend to be really quite popular. Even some educators are doing them 12 minutes and less. So it doesn't have to be um, it doesn't have to be a lot of speaking. It can be a short recording. I really think that things such as having announcements every day, or doing interviews, are a great, easy way, or even reviews where your students review what they just read. Oh, I really enjoyed this. Ooh, but I wonder where the plot will go next. So it's a great way to get students interested in reading whatever novel, or whatever novel or reading they have. I think you one of the first steps is for them to see what's out there. And I recently did this a couple of months ago in Venezuela, and we started by listening to some of my favorite podcasts. We actually listened to a very new podcast. I was working with adult learners at the time because I was training the teachers on how to create and do these podcast audio project. And they can listen to famous podcasters or broadcasters and get a sense. And this is one of the steps that's actually in my book, Learning to Go. So, Learning to Go is it has templates, it has rubrics, it has all the steps for doing this, and even the links to places you can go. So, I'll show you that at the end, but I'll walk you through the process that I do in Learning to Go. So the first step in learn for the lesson suggested there is to evaluate podcasts and broadcasts. And I found this really great site, and it's really interesting. So what I did with my particular students is I had them listen to broadcast news from the 1950s or events there. And so it's a listening exercise in a way, because what you do is you first play a snippet. And this one is great because it's from those broadcasts. It's actually live recording from some of the best commentators in the world. And there's male and there are females in there as well. And what I had them do was, I didn't tell them the event, but it makes good short listening exercises. And what they did was, but this is better than a listening exercise, because it has the purpose of later they're going to produce their own. So they're learning about the style, they're learning about how to create interest, how to grab the audience. But we also did where they listened to one of these from the older time, and then we listened to a podcast called A Snippet of Invisibilia, and then the students got to say, compare and contrast, which one was easier to understand. What are some differences that they've had in the past from the news, the way they reported then, and now how they report news now. And it was quite interesting. The students actually found, as a group, we also did a cognitive map. We did a concept map. And what we did is we listened to it, and then I had them each write down in the concept map what it is they heard, what were the snippets, and then they had to guess the story. Because I just played it for them. I didn't tell them what the story was. I just said, you're gonna have to listen carefully, write down whatever key phrases, and it is going to be news. So they had to guess what the news was, and I think that's a good activity, because if they have to guess what the news is, then they'll be able to really find out. They'll really pay attention to it. The next one that has a lot of really great ones is the American Art, and so that's another place where you can go and you can find some really good listening exercises that are for students. So a lot of times when I do these, I want to find the ones that are going to be good as well. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can find the pearl trees for this because I forgot to share that with Peggy. And that way you can have the bookmarks. So that way you don't have to. Peggy's really good about giving the bookmarks, but that way you can have them as well. But if not, they're definitely in my SlideShare presentations, which you get for free as well. But this is a great one as well. You can find a lot of podcasts to listen to. So sometimes it's good if you can get them, if you're working with learners of a certain age, teenagers, or if you're working with children, it's it's helpful for them to hear podcasts from other kids or teens, in their students in their age group. Then they're more empowered. Sometimes they also think, well, some that might think it's silly will hear what others did, and it could be inspiring from their age group. So these are places where you can find for your students, and then they won't. They'll take it a bit more seriously. And sometimes the great part about that is they get a little bit competitive and want to create something just as much. Or, oh, thank you so much, Peggy, for sharing the slides. Um, and they'll want to create something that's just as good, or even better. There's the podcastdirectory.com that has a bunch as well. The good thing to note, so the podcast directory has a little RSS sign here. So this is, again, going over, it used to be the difference between a radio show and a podcast was that you could subscribe to a podcast and then you'd have an RSS feed. Um, Now it's a bit different. So now I believe, and this could be, but this is my personal observation, that a podcast tends to be more of the style of the way things are reported. But a radio show can have music. A radio show can have, for example, it could be something that um, sometimes it's more for entertainment, sometimes, but they've kind of done both. They cross. So often a podcast is a radio show, and a radio show is a podcast because they both have an RSS that stays, and they both do kind of the same. But you can definitely use these different recommendations for educational purposes, and they are made for teachers and students. But there are other interesting podcasts if you work with older learners, and sometimes even with younger learners, you can get a clip of an episode and they'll really be interested. One of the most popular ones this year was Serial. And Serial, there was even one by Joe Mazza. Joe Mazza did. They also did. Um, with Serial, they kind of did an education version of that. It was really interesting. Some teachers got together and made it. And so some students will find that, and these are fantastic because these particular types of podcasts, if you take a clip, and it's important to note that with these particular podcasts, you do have to monitor which ones you play. I played one by Invisibilia, and it was fantastic because Invisibilia and the one that I did, they had where they started off with the penny cup, and the penny cup had they had two cups, and you put a penny in what you believed in. So in this particular one, it was a cat or dog person. So what would be a good follow-up activity from that kind of listening of that podcast? And then they went on to proceed to talk about the differences between cat and dogs. That was easy for my students and easier for them to understand versus the broadcast. And they really enjoyed that. They enjoyed that afterwards when they listened to Invisibilia, that it was easier for their ears. And so it was great because they felt like they understood a lot more. But a good follow up was then we could do our own. I could give each pair two cups, and they could work together to come up. It was an easy podcast follow up episode because they could create their own comparisons, agree, disagree with the cup on any topic they wanted. And then they had to make the podcast and record it and do the script based on that and information they gathered about those type of categories. So it was an easy follow up. It was a great lesson, and we had a great time together. I have my students, they're going to be in the bookmarks as well, so you can listen to their podcasts once I upload them. The TED Talk hour is really great for students as well. That's an easy follow up as well because they do it over a certain theme. And then what can you do as a follow up podcast? Well, one of the follow up podcasts is that you can have them do their own TED Talk. So, or they can do an easy one is they can work in groups and or pairs, and they can find their TED Talks that they want to review, because basically that's what the TED Talk hour does. Radio Lab has a lot of science in it. So you can learn a lot of science and math by listening to podcasts as well. You can learn about any kind of subject and topic. So that's why podcasts are fantastic, because any kind of, if you teach different types of subjects like I have, and you're trying to find a technology project that will support that, but that students are really engaged and want to listen to, then this is a great way to get them to do that. One of the easiest ways to create a podcast and have content for it is conduct interviews. And I love doing interview activities. So in the past, I've mentioned to do interviews for creating a newspaper, and then also now even for video, even for a podcast. It's one of the easiest ways to just constantly figure out for students to practice their listening skills, especially English language learners, because they have to take notes and they have to pay attention to somebody else. But they're already prepped for the project. And that's the important part of interviews. When you're in an interview, there's a different process for that. You can get your students to begin creating good questions. You can work with them. And the first part of it, if you decide to do podcasts with an interview, you can give them a topic. One of the easiest ways is say, okay, their reaction to a local event. They can prep for what is happening in the school. So if there's a talent show, for example, then that would be news, and they can interview the people that are going to be in the talent show. That's something kind of easy to interview friends. What they can do is, as a class, give them time to brainstorm and learn about the question. Well, what kind of questions would we ask someone who's going to be in the talent show? What might be good questions? You can have your students generate some questions. There is also storycorps.org that talks about the interview process, and they have where the students can learn about great questions. And StoryCorps is full of recordings, and they're great for students. They talk about history. I have played recordings for my students where a parent or a child or grandchild interviewed their relatives about the Holocaust, and so you can find a lot of historical events or their of the war. These are meaningful stories. Plus, it gives them a way to practice English. And if their parents or their grandparents don't speak English, like my grandparents spoke Spanish, then it's a great way for them to practice translation skills too. So you can get them to kind of do both. They can translate what it would be in English or another language as well. So if you teach Spanish, they could do that as well. So these are definitely different. Yes, exactly. And Peggy says, I wish I had interviewed and recorded my parents before they passed away. Would love to have those memories saved. a lot of times I try to get students involved in their relatives and interviewing them, because when I was little, I believe I was about 10, my teacher had me interview my grandparents to figure out, and my parents and my aunts and uncles to figure out my family tree, where I came from, what were the ethnicities and the backgrounds, and it was one of the best projects. I still remember it today. It was pen and pencil, and now you can record it and have those digital recordings forever because I don't have that paper. But the other thing is you can get them to identify who's going to be a good candidate for my story, who's going to be a good candidate to interview, and then they can go through. After they do the interview and conduct it and write it, and they talk about questions and how to conduct an interview and what are the ethical, um, what's the ethics behind that, how do you because when you do that, there's another thinking that goes on. How do you ethically portray and translate what somebody else has said? And so these are things that come with interviewing. um, the other great and the best way to capture story and to sing is to summarize it. So there's definitely a little bit of a process. This isn't dead set, but this is the process that I think goes into this, that we go through when we do these projects. We have brainstorming, where they get to brainstorm who they want to, what. So you give them the topic, you give them the project, the audio. So if it's, for example, like my teacher, what is your background? Then they brainstorm, okay, how am I gonna create this podcast? And then you give them the parameters, you give them a checklist. It's gonna be 5 minutes. We're gonna put this on audio booth. So you let them know ahead of time, those kind of details. Really quick checklist. I love checklists. And then afterwards, they do the evaluation, and this is considering that they've done some kind of evaluation of also a podcast or radio cast, so that way they know, or radio show, so they understand what goes behind it, how people speak, how short it is, those kind of things. They brainstorm who they can, how they're going, are they going to do, what is it going to be about. If you give them a broad topic and you say it's going to be current events, or they need to brainstorm the people. And then they need to brainstorm where they're going to discover the information. So you have the research phase, you have where they go out there and they gather the information. They may go through sites, they may go through the interview process, they may use infographics, so whatever way, but it's definitely important they do research for their podcast. They're scripting it, and so when they script it, and the great thing about research is get that when they do an audio one and they do interviews, that's a primary resource. It's coming from a source that experience. So I like that too because it teaches digital research, good digital research. Script it, then they have to script it because it has to be short. And this is where, for language learners, I think the power is, because if you are teaching language learners, then they're able to correct the grammar. They're able to make things sound a certain way, and then they can review it with their friends. They can do peer editing, and they can make sure that what they're saying, the right word. This is where they have to be selective. They have to say, "This is the word I want to use. This is not the right word to grasp this." So it goes through. They go through a thinking process of how the best way to portray that information is. And they can, I find that if they do it in pairs or they do it in groups, it's easier to do this. If you do it with one student, the other great part about it is it's shorter recordings, it's less for you to grade, but it isn't less work that they're doing. So that's really awesome. Plus, you have to understand that some of the students are going to be too shy to put their voice on the air at first. So if this is your first project, I think it's really powerful to do it in groups and pairs, because your students, not every single one of them at first is going to want to be on the air. They got to get comfortable with that. But there are going to be some that are going to jump at the opportunity and say, I want to do it. I want to be the ones who, and it's an easy way to give them roles and responsibilities, which is something I talk about on Learning to Go as well. They can record it. They can, and then after they've scripted, they've also part of the script, and I'll give you in the bookmark the storyboards because I do different storyboards and things like that. They also put in the sound effects. They say, okay, we want people cheering, we want this. So that's all in the script, and they have to record. Then they record it. They're gonna have to edit it, and usually they'll do the editing process quite a bit, and then they while they're editing it and recording it, they also remix it. So that means they'll add sounds, and they may add sounds, or they may add audio or songs that they didn't create. So remix means you take other people's materials that they have freely given, that have a Creative Commons license, and say, here, you can use this, you can make your podcast sound really snazzy. And the students like to do that a lot. And then they broadcast it somewhere, or they publish it and they show it. And that's called broadcasting. So all of this you can find. There's one called In the News, but it's kind of a way to also have others, and it's at the book Learning to Go, so you can see that later. But there are different types of ways for this process that you could find free materials for as well. So Read Write Think, that has wonderful readwritethink.org. You have to do a search for audio, and it has fantastic interactives and also handouts that you can even print. You don't if you have a little devices or connectivity issues, then definitely Read Write Think is really great, because you can see they're evaluating audio before, during, and after listening. So it's really great. It's a great framework. Then there's even one where they make sound effects. It says sound effects. So all of these are actually different lessons from Read Write Think. So you could have several lessons about this. Record, remixing, and editing. Well, there when you edit and remix, you Audacity and GarageBand tend to be the two popular ones. So usually, if you have a Mac device, you can have GarageBand. It's my favorite. It's on iPad and it's fantastic. I absolutely love it. But Audacity is a free one. You can use that for those that are not iOS. You usually have a soundboard. You have something like this where you can edit the audio, and you can pick in case your students want to add music, and they can plug in their instrument and they can have it recorded. So if they want to make their own music as well, they can record voices, and they would choose like the female or male narrator. So there's a lot of different options. Soundation is another one. It's another way to edit and evaluate audio. And you can do this also if you want to do, if you eventually get to the point where you can do this with another class, either around your school or maybe around the world. You can do this as a group project with Soundation. Soundation allows you to go on a Google Hangout, and you can hang out with people from another country or students from another country and create a podcast. How cool is that? Or you can create the background music for a movie score. You can do like a talkover. If you find a silent film or something, then they can do one of those talk over. They can do like there used to be an old science show with two aliens called Mystery Science Theater. They could do something like that. So there's a lot of projects in that as well. BooGuru is a great way to collect audio as well. So you can collect audio from your friends. Teachers can collect their projects this way. It's very simple. All they do, it's free. You can even embed this on a wiki or something, so your students can quickly and easily record, and then you have the recording. They just mail it to you, or and it has, or they can send you the link somewhere. They can put the link somewhere if you want to do something really quick and fast. Then as far as remixing, so Austin Kleon says every new idea is a mashup or remix of more. And with podcasts, especially, that's true. You usually see that, of course, the people who the students create the podcast, but they may use music and they often want to. So it's good to review with them Creative Commons to let them know. And we talked about that in a previous podcast. But ccmixter.org has a wonderful app as well, iOS app. I'm not sure they have the Android. They may, but it's fantastic, and these artists are musicians that have fantastic music for podcasting. I've used it plenty of times, and you just give the proper attribution, and they use it for Creative Commons license, especially for education. Freesound.org has many different kinds of sounds that your students can add to add effects, sound effects. Soundbible.com is good. And you, of course, there's a Pearl tree full of Creative Commons. And of course, you can find all of this when you go to the slide share. And I'll share that again. If you just scroll down, you'll find where it lists all these sites. And then I'm also putting this on my website, shellyterrell.com/audio, and you'll be able to find all this free as well. Broadcast it. Where do you publish it? So when you're broadcasting, that's a way of publishing and letting people listen to it. There's a couple of places you can do AudioBoo, um, SoundCloud. There's iPatio. There's Spreaker. Somebody mentioned Spreaker earlier. Audio Boo, and that's a great way to record it as well. So these are also places you can record if you wanted to as well. But if you went through the steps of putting it through Audacity, or you did it through, which I think is better, go through Audacity, go through GarageBand to do the recording for the quality and sounds, then you can definitely do things for you can definitely do a lot there. Um, so it depends on you. I think AudioBoo and iPatio are the best ones in my personal opinion. It's really easy to use iPatio from different places. Or to collect sound through BooGuru if you don't have a chance. But SoundCloud has some iffy content, that's why. So Podomatic is really good as well. Um, but they're not as easy and user friendly and accessible. If you have different devices in the classroom, iPatio and AudioBoo are the easiest ways to record and have access. Now, if you only want to use one thing, then yes, your students can do it on GarageBand, all of these things. But they have mobile apps for iPatio and AudioBoo. Podomatic has they do have an app, but it's to listen to pods. I don't think they have it yet where you can record. They might have changed, but at least it wasn't like that before. SoundCloud is great. I love it. Unfortunately, they haven't really gone through their content and evaluated it. BAM Radio Network is really great as well. BAM Radio Network has for teachers. So if the teacher wants to do one and they want to do it with students, they can have their own radio show. And the people involved with the BAM Radio Network will walk you through it as well. And they're short. They're only like 12 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes. We have an Ed Chat radio show, and I might in the future do a 30 goals, but we'll see. They're great apps, so you can do this easily on a mobile device. You can have something like Talking Ben in news. So if you do news and you want to create an audio project with the news, then this is a fantastic app. It even involves video, so that'll be for the next one. But we're gonna wrap things up already. They have Yak It for Kids. That's a really simple, easy audio project. You just add audio to different and this Yaki for Kids will disguise the voice for really young kids. These are great recording and starting places to do audio projects. Chatterpix Kids as well. You can see little Roscoe. And Roscoe's done quite a few Chatterpix. And he even one of the great things is he got Roscoe got to preview and a really great teachers that were here in Australia with me, which is Joyce Valenza and Shannon Miller. And Roscoe got to be featured his Chatterpix in their presentation in Australia. So that was really good. So your students, it's great because they can do audio products where if you're studying animals, then they can say they can do things that's an easy audio project as well. Imagine yourself as an animal for a day, or your pet, and they can take pictures of different pets, goldfish and things, and animate them. The great thing about Yak It for Kids and Shatterpix for Kids, so make sure it's the kids one. Um, They are free downloads, by the way. Is that you can they're monitored, and they have restrictions and stuff. They made it for kids to be safe for kids, so they do have the safe version. But the Yak It for Kids, the previous slide, you'll find that they have also they have more than one slide, so that's why I prefer Yak It. Shadowpix doesn't. If you want a more sophisticated project, if you're doing something more intense, Adobe Voice, which a lot of teachers do recommend. They love it. They say it's really awesome for audio projects, and you can add pictures and stuff. Tell About This, another one. It actually is easier because this one has prompts. It has thinking prompts. The kids see the thinking prompts, and then they can do a simple voice recording. So already, if you're thinking, oh, I don't know what kind of project or topic they should have, well, that one's easy because it gives them prompts. So you don't even have to think about that. It's something they can do and really talk about. And then you have Bunty Pro. Bunty is fat, but don't let it fool you that Bunty Pro is paid. It's not. They have a pro version that's an iPad app, and the reason why is because their Bunty Bits doesn't record audio. So the Bunty Pro, you have to do the Bunty Pro, which is free, and it records audio, but you have slides, so it's really great for language learners, and they can draw and stuff. 30hands.com, and that's an app as well. You can add pictures as well. You can make a video. You can make audio. So find all of these in my Pearl trees, and so I'm gonna add the few resources by Jane Hart and some other ones that were on here that were shared. So I'll go ahead and add that to it. But you can find this later on. I'll publish the slides and stuff when I get back. I'm actually flying right after this, so I'll publish those in the next few days, and you'll see them at Shell, Tarot, and my other places, so you can do them. So don't worry about all of this. I'll figure it. I'll put it all up for you. But there is one. You can go to teacherubootcamp.com right now. Resources, listening, and buying a lot of these. So thank you so much for coming. Next week, I will see you for video projects, and I will be in San Antonio, Texas, with a much better connection. So thank you all so much, and have a great, great weekend.